Conservation of forest and wildlife in India. Conservation is necessary to preserve the ecological diversity and our life support systems, water, air, and soil. It also preserves the genetic diversity of plants and animals for better growth of species and breeding. For example, in agriculture, we are still dependent on traditional crop varieties. Fisheries too are heavily dependent on the maintenance of aquatic biodiversity. The Indian Wildlife Protection Act was implemented in 1972 with various provisions for protecting habitats. The thrust of the program was towards protecting the remaining population of certain endangered species by banning hunting, giving legal protection to their habitats, and restricting trade in wildlife. Subsequently, central and many state governments established national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. The central government also announced several projects for protecting gravely threatened species, including the tiger, the one-horned rhinoceros, the Kashmir stag or hangul, 3 types of crocodiles, freshwater crocodile, saltwater crocodile, and gharial, the Asiatic lion, and others. Most recently, the Indian elephant, black buck, chinkara, the great Indian bustard, godawan, and the snow leopard, etc., have been given full or partial legal protection against hunting and trade throughout India. Project Tiger. Tiger is one of the key wildlife species in the faunal web. In 1973, the authorities realized that the tiger population had dwindled to 1,827 from an estimated 55,000 at the turn of the century. The major threats to tiger population are numerous, such as poaching for trade, shrinking habitat, depletion of prey-based species, growing human population, etc. The trade of tiger skins and use of their bones in traditional medicines, especially in the Asian countries, left the tiger population on the verge of extinction. Since India and Nepal provide habitat to about 2/3 of surviving tiger population in the world, these two nations become prime targets for poaching and illegal trading. Project Tiger, one of the well-publicized wildlife campaigns in the world, was launched in 1973 initially. It showed success as the tiger population went up to 4,002 in 1985 and 4,334 in 1989. But in 1993, the population of the tiger had dropped to 3,600. There are 27 tiger reserves in India covering an area of 37,761 square. Corbett National Park in Uttaranchal, Sundarbans. National Park in West Bengal, Bandhavgarh National Park in Madhya Pradesh. Sariska Wildlife Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Manas Tiger Reserve in Assam, and Periyar Tiger Reserve in Kerala are some of the tiger reserves in India. The conservation projects are now focusing on biodiversity rather than on a few of its components. In the notification under Wildlife Act of 1980 and 1986, several hundred butterflies, moths, beetles, and one dragonfly have been added to the list of protected species in 1991. For the first time, plants were also added to the list, starting with 6 species. Types and distribution of forest and wildlife resources. In India, most of forest and wildlife resources are either owned or managed by the government through the Forest Department or other government departments. These are classified under the following categories. Reserved forests. More than half of the total forest land has been declared reserved forest. Reserved forests are regarded as the most valuable as far as conservation of forest and wildlife resources are concerned. Protected forests. Almost 1/3 of the total forest area is protected forest, as declared by Forest Department. This forest land is protected from any further depletion. Unclassed forest. These are other forests and wastelands belonging to both government and private individuals and community. Permanent forest. Reserved and protected forest are also referred to as permanent forest. Estates maintained for the purpose of producing timber and other forest produce and for protective reasons. Madhya Pradesh has the largest area under permanent forest, constituting 75% of its total forest area. Jammu and Kashmir, Andhra Pradesh, Uttaranchal, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal and Maharashtra have large percentages of reserved forest of its total forest area, where Bihar, Haryana, Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Orissa and Rajasthan have a bulk of it under protected forest. All northeastern states and parts of Gujarat have a very high percentage of their forest as unclassed forest managed by local community. Community and conservation. In India, forests are also home to some of the traditional communities. In some areas, local communities are struggling to conserve these habitats along with government officials, recognizing that only this will secure their own long-term livelihood. In Sarsika Tiger Reserve, Rajasthan villagers have fought against mining by citing the Wildlife Protection Act. In many areas, villagers themselves are protecting habitats. The inhabitants of 5 villages in the Alwar district of Rajasthan have declared 1200 hectares of forest as the Bhairav Dev Dakav sanctuary and protecting the wildlife against any outside encroachments. Sacred groves. Sacred groves are wealth of diverse and rare species. Nature worship is an age-old tribal belief based on the premise that all creations of nature have to be protected. Such beliefs have preserved several virgin forests in pristine form called sacred groves, the forests of God and goddesses. Certain societies revere a particular tree which they have preserved from time immemorial. The Mundas and Senthil of Chota Nagpur region worship Mahua, Basia latifolia and Kadamba Anthocephalus Kadamba trees, and the tribals of Orissa and Bihar worships the tamarind. Tamarind indica and mango Mangifera indica trees during weddings. Too many of us, people and banyan trees are considered sacred. Indian society comprises several cultures, each with its own set of traditional methods of conserving nature and its creation. Sacred qualities are often ascribed to springs, mountain peaks, plants, and animals, which are closely protected. You will find troops of macaws and langurs around many temples. They are fed daily and treated as a part of temple devotees. In and around Bishnoi villages in Rajasthan, herds of black buck, chinkara, nilgai and peacock can be seen as integral part of community. Chipko movement in the Himalayas has successfully resisted deforestation in several areas. Farmers and citizens group like Beach Bachao Andolan in Tehri and Navdanya have shown that adequate levels of diversified crop production without to use synthetic chemicals are possible and economically viable. In India, Joint Forest Management (JFM) program sets a good example for involving local communities in the management and restoration of degraded forest. JFM depends on the formation of local village institutions that undertake protection activities mostly on degraded forest land, which is managed by the Forest Department. In return, the members of these communities are entitled to intermediary benefits like non-timber forest produces and share in the timber harvested by successful protection. The clear lesson from the dynamics of both environmental destruction and reconstruction in India is that local communities everywhere have to be involved in some kind of natural resource management. But there is still a long way to go before local communities are at the center stage